Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. As an artist, I often get asked if it's upsetting for me to sell my work, if I find it difficult to let my paintings go. I usually answer this by saying that for me, I treat my paintings as if they were puppies. I love them, I care a great deal for them, but I know that they cannot stay with me. So the important thing becomes trying to find a good home, just like I'd want my puppies to find a good owner. When some of my favorite paintings sell, I do get emotional. But it's not because they are leaving me, it's more because I'm happy that these creations have found a home. For me, there's nothing sadder than seeing one of my favorite paintings just sit in storage instead of being out in the world decorating other people's lives. So when we talk about the life cycle of an artwork, there's more than just inspiration, painting, planning, creation. There's also the sale. There's the handover, and whatever the final destination of the artwork might be. So in that way, the role of the buyer, of the collector, is almost as important as the role of the creator, since they are the ones who will carry the piece of art into the future. So today on the Art Colony, to talk about the collector and the business of selling art, we have with us Mr. Gavin Kennedy. Welcome, Gavin.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you here. So tell us, who is Gavin Kennedy?
Gavin Kennedy is currently an art advisor based in P-Town in Boston. But Gavin Kennedy, as a person, a little bit of my journey to get there as an art advisor is Gavin Kennedy's just a longtime lover and now most recently a supporter of arts, in particular emerging artists.
Tell us about your Provincetown connection.
My journey to P-Town started quite a long time ago as a child. My parents had a boat in Kingston, and we would take the boat over here as just sort of a day journey to get ice cream and walk up the Pilgrim Monument and maybe get lunch or see some whales. And as a little artistic kid, there was something about P-Town that I knew that I really liked, even, as a 8-year-old to a 16-year-old, I would go with my parents. And part of that was that this was a queer community, and I was seeing gay people out in the world, really for the first time. But a bigger part of that, or just as big a part of that, was just seeing it as a creative community and just seeing people in town, whether they were gay or straight, young or old, expressing themselves in a really creative sense. And I just remember walking up and down and seeing, Commercial Street and seeing all these really amazing, boutiques and shops and art galleries and expressive stores, and just thinking like, what is this magical place? I didn't come back again until an adult. And in fact, really after graduate school, I moved back to Massachusetts after, many, many years living on the other side of the country. P-Town was one of the first places that I wanted to visit. And all these sort of feelings that I had from when I first came here rose back to the surface. And it was just a place I knew I wanted to be. And that was in 2002. I got a place with my partner in 2005 and have been coming here ever since. And really by that, I mean, for the longest time, it was on weekends, but really all year round. This last year, wish I did it a while ago, but I officially changed my address here. And it feels
congratulations.
Nice to be an official townie, even though I felt like a townie for many years now.
So you have a very deep connection to this town.
Yes, yeah. And I feel really lucky for that.
So you know the art world here very well. And I also saw on your resume that you're on the board of the Fine Arts Work Center.
I am, yeah. The Fine Arts Work Center is, for anyone that spends any time with me, like probably something I talk about or bring up in conversation 10 times a day at least. I'm so in love with that organization and their mission and what they do and the team. It's truly a privilege and an honor and a joy to be able to contribute in any meaningful way to that organization. So I've been a trustee for them. In some ways, it feels like I just joined, in others, I know I've been there for quite a while. So it's probably been about 10 years. and it's been, just to see the transformation that that organization has, made in many artists and writers' lives, is, it's just very inspirational. Right now, I'm, the chair of their advancement committee, and, I like to think a really value-added member of the board.
Well, good. Well, that's one of the organizations in town that has the widest international range of connections, and it's appropriate that you're linked with them because what you have recently created is also something that has hopefully a big international reach. So
Mhm.
tell us about your new firm that you just put together.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it and, ways that it can, hopefully be of service to the P-Town community.
Hmm.
The firm is called Emerging Art Advisory, and really our mission is my mission is to, help connect contemporary and emerging artists that, I think have really, something to say that's meaningful and important to, collectors, so trying to make that connection, that you spoke about earlier. That might mean it's a first-time collector that's really trying to buy that first piece of art that's meaningful, or it might mean a really seasoned collector. Some of my clients are, have been collecting for many years, that might be purchasing significant blue chip work, but wants to expand their collection and their collecting sensibilities into supporting younger, more contemporary artists. Um, and then I also, so a big part of my firm is working with collectors to understand their values, how they want to live their lives, what they want to get out of art, and find art that can add meaning to their life. And then and another part is just working with artists, that I really admire and helping them, establish, their careers and make connections to galleries, artists, museums, etcetera.
So, what brought you to create this company? Did you see a lack in the world of art that needed to be filled that you need to respond to, or did you? How did you come up with this idea?
Well, if you'll indulge me, I'll take a step back to give a little bit of that
Sure.
journey because it's a little bit of a complex answer, but I guess at the at the face of it, it's really just about authentic passion for art and artists, and really feeling that contemporary art, uh, is so important in, making the world a better place in terms of helping to create understanding of other people, helping to create a better understanding of ourselves, helping to drive empathy. Um, there's just so many amazing things that living with art can do, I think. And so, that's the sort of passionate answer. But in terms of the business opportunity and seeing that white space, even though I was someone that was really always interested in art, and I didn't see myself as an artist, and so, uh, I admired artists, and I really looked up to them, and I thought what they did was incredible and impossible for me. And I didn't really understand, when you're at that part of your life, when you're 18 or 19 or 20 and, trying to make these decisions of what you're gonna do with your life, that there was a career in arts for me if I wasn't an artist. And so I took a different path for a long time, and I, got an MBA, and I worked in marketing leadership for many years, and I liked it, but really what drove joy in my life, was staying engaged uh, with the arts world, and so I've sort of thought of myself as a lifelong student of art. So I was, going to every gallery show I could and voraciously reading every art book I could and going to museums and, just absorbing as much as I could. And then that led to me collecting. Um, and collecting opened up this whole other world. And that's, a big part of this inspiration. It comes from my own personal experience. So when I started collecting, it just was transformative in my life. I took it very, very seriously because I didn't have enormous budgets to collect. So I engaged deeply and to build really meaningful collection for myself. So I met gallerists, and those gallerists happen to be like all over the place. Like, I, in New York and LA and Europe, I met artists and became friends with artists and started doing studio visits, and I met other collectors and asked their advice and joined collecting groups and just really immerse myself in that world, and that helped me understand the ecosystem of the art world a little better and the complexity of the business side of art and how complex it is, one, for an artist and a gallerist to do what they do, not only from a creative standpoint, but then to actually make the sale. And then also from a collector's standpoint, how hard it is to navigate um, the sort of opaque, like what can often be like a really opaque world of art. And so, it took me time to figure that out. And there wasn't really anyone guiding me through it. And I made mistakes. And, I felt like sometimes made mistakes that were like I was taken advantage of um, or bought things I didn't like because I didn't quite know who I was as a collector but over time, I think I really got a really strong sense of how and why to build a good collection, and that led to me being on boards, which led to further understanding of that the art world and artists and more networking connections and a depth of connections, and a lot of art collecting can often be about, like, relationships and access, fortunately and unfortunately, and then I also started getting asked for advice all the time from friends that because, another thing that so if I'm not talking about FOC, I'm talking about art and artists and, like, almost to an annoying extent. So people started asking me all the time about, artists they might collect and how do they start and where should they go and could I make an introduction and I loved doing that. And it was actually a really amazing collector friend that's on the board of the ICA with me that suggested that I do this for a living. And that was this sort of aha moment of like, whoa, wait, you can like connect your passion to your work. um, wasn't something I had really thought about. And it took me a few years to take that seriously. And I met with a lot of other art advisors and art professionals and collectors and galleries and artists to get their opinion and people were incredibly supportive around it. And so that was a long-winded answer, but really it comes down to this idea of like I felt like I learned a lot and I feel like I can bring this sort of business mindset perspective to the table um, and sort of merge that with a deep love and passion for artists and the desire to support art. And I did see a white space for people to sort of more deeply engage in building a collection versus buying something that they felt like was a decoration on the wall.
It's great that you found a way to follow your passion.
Thank
I
you.
find very often that in today's world, when we finish high school, we're sort of pushed to make a decision right away, and we end
Mhm.
up going in fields often that we didn't really want to get into, but we're just into that rhythm and we keep on going. I had the same thing. I went back to school in my late 30s and became an artist in my early 40s. And, but it's great. We all get to our passion eventually somehow. And also what you were saying about, how it can be difficult for galleries to sell art and for collectors to decide what to buy. I see that every day in my gallery
Mhm.
because, I think I've figured out the pattern. I think I figured out, how I'm going to sell this piece to that person. And, they have a whole different way of perceiving the transaction, or they ask questions that I was not expecting. Every person is different. Every person has a different approach to art.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the approach is I have to talk to my spouse, which I hate hearing. I hate hearing that. It's like, come on, make a decision, do it now. So talking about my gallery, one thing I was thinking about today when I was preparing for this episode and seeing people coming in, I was thinking, how do we define the difference between just a buyer and a collector?
I think that's such a good question. And that's actually really at the heart of what I'm trying to do with this business is, we live in a town where there's these big, really expensive houses and people have things on their walls. The people that are visiting this town, it's no secret it's an expensive town. And, presumably people coming to town want things on their walls as well. Um, and I think a lot of times people that I think of more as like a buyer versus a collector is someone that I think the intentions are really great, but it's a little maybe more haphazard. They're looking for something to fill a certain space on their wall, or they want to be a certain color. They know vaguely what an aesthetic appeals to them, and they know what color their couch is, what color their rug is, and
It's
they
not even a joke. It's true. It happens every day in my gallery.
yeah, it's a
They take measurements of specific spaces. They bring swatches of the color of the couch or the wall. I see that all the time.
and that's a buyer, and and that's great. And there's buyers are needed to drive gallery sales and artists as well. But I think what's better is if someone comes in and they're a collector, and I think by that, that's someone that I think comes in with intention, like they know the story of the artist, or if they don't, maybe they're sparked by the idea that they're seeing something that is aesthetically appealing, or something jumps out at them. Um, but then they want to go one or two or three or four levels deeper. Like, who is the artist? What inspired this work? Does it align with their personal values? What's the storytelling behind the piece? Like, there's a lot of reasons to create art. Some of it is, conceptual art, or can just be about shape and placement and color and exploring that. It doesn't necessarily have to have some like deeper contextual societal meaning. But when people understand what's behind the work, and that matters to them, and they understand what's behind the gallerist's intention in showing the work, and they understand what the artist was trying to say, and and they're buying it for those reasons, then I think that's when someone becomes a collector, because that's something that they're going to cherish when it's on their wall. It's not something they're going to forget about because it makes their home more beautiful. It's going to make their home more beautiful because they have an emotional connection to it, and it matters to them in a more meaningful way. And I think my goal with my company is to turn buyers into collectors, because it added so much more value to my own life in how I engage with people and how I think about the world. Art can really be as storytelling as a book, um, and so I think when people are already spending a lot of like, even if you're buying art as a decoration, it's an investment. Like, it costs money. So what I say to my clients is like, even if you're buying one work that you're working with me, like, let's talk about finding something that's not just beautiful to you, but that aligns with how you live your life, or how you want to live in your home, and like what's important to you. Because you're gonna look at that, and you're gonna feel something every time you see it. And what I found is, when someone has a good experience doing that, then they come back, and it's infectious. Like, you wanna buy more, because then it's just opening your mind to, "Well, this is what this artist is saying, like, what are these other artists saying? What stories are they telling?" And what does those stories in my curation of those stories in my own home tell about me?
I know that every buyer and every collector would be different, but if we talk in general terms, what should artists think of? What is it that gets these collectors' attention? What will bring them into your space? What will bring them into your gallery?
It's funny, that's like you said, it really depends on each of the buyers, unfortunately, but I think there are some things that probably are universal. The first thing I would say is, you know, just as I think about artists and gallerists, I'm very sympathetic, because especially, if you're an artist, you have to be creative. You have to have this technical ability. You have to have this ability to translate something in your mind to something visual that inspires others and excites something in them. And you kind of have to be a business person too. And it's
Absolutely.
completely not reasonable, but that's the reality. And if you're lucky, you have a gallerist, or like you run your own gallery. So you do have a business sense, but that kind of stuff is really time consuming. So you have to be choiceful about, like, what are those tactics that I'm going to use to engage with potential collectors in a way that's deeper. And I think if you're an artist, it starts with having, and some artists are good at writing, they really struggle with that, which is why they become visual artists maybe. And so I think there are tools you can use to help you with this, but I think having a really good artist statement and story that you can concisely communicate to collectors is important. And I think you don't have to, a lot of artists want people to see what they want to see in their work and they don't want to over explain it. And I think that's absolutely reasonable. But I think you have to be able to at least help people understand how they can connect with their work and be able to synthesize that. If you can't, like, your gallery should be able to do that. So there's the idea of like building the relationship when people are coming in the door. And I think it's being able to, um, maybe it's ask that visitor questions too about, um, what made them walk in, like what kinds of uh, things are they looking for beyond something beautiful? What are their interests outside of art? And kind of it's like about relationship building and storytelling. I think, as I think about my collector clients today, they're not just looking for something that I mean, there's so many different reasons to buy art, but they're not just looking for something that they um, are hanging on their walls and they think is interesting, and maybe they even think beyond it being interesting, it's could be a part of art canon or it's significant in some way in that sort of bookish way. They're looking for something that they feel is storytelling. And so then I put my marketing hat on and I'm like, okay, well, if the goal is like education and storytelling, like what are those best paths to do that with new collectors? So like both from like a channel perspective, meaning, you know, uh, social media, PR, things like a podcast, and from a messaging perspective. And I think if storytelling is important, I think seeking opportunities to engage with collectors in a way that allows for that breadth of space to build the story and to build a relationship is work best. So social media isn't super great for that necessarily because it's short, but I think if you can tell a story over time through a wall, maybe it's your inspiration, your process, um, then I think that can help people understand who you are. CVs and artist bios and stuff can help a bit. I think press can help. Certainly, interviews. Your podcast is an excellent
Well,
example.
thank you. Well, I can say for sure that it has brought more people to my gallery, so I'm very happy to see that it's had that result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love this podcast. You do a really good job of it, and I love your art too.
Yeah, and being an artist who interacts with people every day because of my situation having my own gallery, I understand fully what you're saying. Every collector is a little bit different. Every person who steps foot in my gallery is a little bit different. I have to sort of gauge, is this a talker or not a talker?
Mhm.
Because some of them, they come in and all they want to do is look at the art. They don't want to hear you. They don't want to hear any input. They just want to they want to have their own experience. Some others come and they just want to talk. They just want to talk and then maybe they'll buy something on the way out. So you have to find the balance between like how much will I interact with this one? How much info does he want? And how much will I be absorbed by that one that will not look at the art at all but just wants to talk? It's always a big it's a balance that I have to play with every day.
Yeah, and so I think, well, clearly, the fact that you're thinking about it in that sense, I think, is already like a really shows a great approach. And so, because there are people that get really intimidated within art gallery spaces because they might feel like they're going to say the wrong thing, and so one of the things I think, well, this podcast is a good example. Again, I'll say is by people seeing this, they're going to learn a little bit more about who you are as an artist and what your art is about. And so that's going to help. But having things that are available to make that person that might not want to talk or might be intimidated to talk engage later is probably a good idea. So, like QR codes that maybe drive to artist statements or something that, like, something that they could take away that's like a card that talks about the story of the art on the back or something that allows them to engage in their own time. But I also think, and this won't be everyone, um, galleries, and in particular, like, I would say maybe not so much in P-Town, but galleries in New York and LA and in Paris and London and other big cities, they have a reputation for making people feel uncomfortable and for gatekeeping and, having there's like the stereotype of the mean gallery attendant that is really snobby and won't answer your questions. And, some of that's based on truth. And some of it is just based on the fact that they're uneasy in their own roles too. And so one of the things that as I've got to know more and more gallerists over time and more collectors is someone has to be that person to like initiate the conversation. And I think galleries that can put people at ease by helping them understand you don't need to know how to talk about this per se. Like you just need to know how it makes you feel. Or let's talk about like how to talk about it a little bit. Or, what do you see in this? And like that's okay, whatever it is. Like um I think can open that conversation that will make people feel invited in.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm very conscious of that. I try very hard to not be that a snobby gallery girl sitting at the desk, like in Absolutely Fabulous. I don't know if you remember
Yes.
that
That's
episode.
exactly what's going right through my
I
head
just
when I
want
said that.
art. Give me some art. But on the other hand, I almost feel like I don't want to give away too much too fast. I don't want to be too pushy. But, everybody has their different ways of approaching buyers, and it's worked well
Mhm.
enough for me for the last 8 years.
Oh,
I'm
yeah, I
still
think
in
you've got
business.
it down. I think,
Yeah.
like, you're very good at what you do, and your gallery is really wonderful, and so this might be for other people out there. But I will say, like, as a general rule, my clients that are collectors, particularly new collectors, don't know they don't know where to start. They don't know what gallery to go in first, like, they don't wanna buy that first big purchase painting because or they haven't until that point of reaching out to me because they don't know what they don't know in terms of what's out there, and they don't wanna make a mistake and they don't so what they're doing right now is just walking into a gallery, the first one they see, and looking at something and being like, "Okay, well, that color fits, and I guess that's good enough." And, what my role is to try to do is say, like, there's a whole host of galleries out there across the world um, that might have a similar aesthetic quality to that, but they have a deeper story that is going to align with your story better, and then helping them figure that out. And then I think once people feel like, oh, there is art that like connects with me and isn't. Yeah, then they get more confident, and it's like easier and easier for people to feel confident and comfortable going into galleries and asking really, interesting questions.
So your mission statement in your for your company says that you're also working with emerging artists.
Mhm.
So define what for you is an emerging artist.
That's a good question. And what I would say is, emerging artists, my I technically work with really any artist. So I've placed blue chip artists and mid career artists and modern artists and contemporary, lots of different types of artists and different collections. But really, where I want an emphasis to be and a focus to be is on this idea of the emerging artists. And what I mean by that is Um, there are so many amazing artists out there that are pushing the canon of art further now and today, but they're trying to do it in a really complex system where there's lots of noise, and some of them are getting lost in the shuffle, and but they're really talented and they need support, or and then from the other end, from the collector standpoint, there's so many young newer artists out there that like where do you even start to find someone that you really click and connect with? Emerging artists to me are people that maybe are newly out of an MFA program or a bachelor's of arts program, and they're just starting their studio practice, or maybe they've been doing it for you know even like 5 to 10 years, but um, they're just starting to maybe get good representation from galleries, or they're just starting to get support within the art ecosystem. Maybe they're in some group shows that are really um, meaningful, or they've gotten some bylines written about them, but they're not um, that mid-career level where they've had museum shows. They're signed to, like the really big blue chip international galleries. There's still room to grow, and but they're figuring out and pretty aligned on what their studio practice is. Those are the artists that I think I like working with because um, one from a really just a pragmatic perspective, their prices are still reasonable, and blue chip art and mid career artists can be really, really expensive. And if you're a new collector, and I like to work with new collectors, or you're a seasoned collector, you might not have that budget to buy. I mean, who does? Like to buy, the $250,000 Salman Tour painting or something. It's very unusual to have that budget. So the price points are still accessible, but also like these are artists that are at a pivotal point in their career. We're getting into important collectors' hands, and getting into collections is going to continue is going to empower them to maintain their studios and buy materials and continue to evolve their work, and get that next big gallery show. And so these are people that have a lot to say, and they're working in a contemporary sense, so they're telling stories that are important right now. And I think in the tumultuous time we live in right now, stories of now are really exciting and interesting and meaningful, and they need support from advisors like me.
And how do you find these emerging artists? And to bring it to Provincetown, do you look for them also here in Provincetown?
Yes, I do, and I would say it's a hard question to answer in terms of how I find them. It's really about relationship building. There's a lot of different types of artists out there, and there's a lot of different ways to be an artist. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think anyone that can make a living creating is someone I admire. But there is art that's intended to be really commercial, and there's art that's intended to be really just beautiful and decorative, and it's about maybe putting out a lot of art really fast at a lower price point. And it's just a different model. The kind of art that I like to work with, and the kind of artists I like to work with, as I said, it's really more about something a little deeper and something a little bit more provocative, and where there's like a concept behind it. There's a deeper story behind it. There's a desire to connect or tell a story about the world. There's something that really kind of like gets at your heart, and it makes you think and feel something in a bigger way. And that's the kind of art that I look for, and the kind of artists I like to work with. And that's, the kind of collector that I like to work with is people that want to collect art that really like has something to say. I think there's a lot of that happening in P Town, and there's a lot of that happening over the world. So some of the ways I find artists in that sense are, in a traditional sense, it's from galleries. So, as I said, I've been a collector for 25 years and gone to pretty much every art fair a dozen times, and just have a large network of galleries and gallerists that I know. And so, always getting documents of like new artist work and new artist bios and new artists that they're signing. So I'm just constantly like hearing about new artists from galleries. And but I take all of that seriously, and I go through all of it, and I'm like a sponge for that kind of stuff. So I love it, and I learn about new artists all the time from gallerists that I really love their roster of artists, or the kinds of artists they like to work with. Another way is through, and this is probably will be surprising, but through Instagram. There is, particularly now that I have this like professional feed, so it's like really just artists coming into my feed. And so what I think is really kind of cool about this generation of emerging artists is they really support each other and get behind each other. And so, if if someone in their sort of studio, or when they went to art school with, or that they have developed like a post MFA bond with, is doing really well, then oftentimes in today's art world, they'll even do their own group shows where they'll bring their artist friends into it, or they'll promote their artist friends that they really love their work on Instagram. So if there's an artist I really, really love and admire, one that comes to town and comes to mind is Alana Savdi. She teaches workshops in the summer at the Fine Arts Work Center. She's an incredible artist, and I just trust her vision for herself, and I just trust her vision for art in general. And so whenever she's like talking about another artist on her Instagram, I'm like, okay, I want to see who this person is. So I learned about artists from Instagram and from other art friends, and then just from sometimes just, like, wandering around, like, wandering into galleries. And part of what makes it fun is that what makes it fun for someone like me, but makes it hard for someone that's a collector is there's so much to see. And so it's like, how do you find like, let's say you walk by 10 galleries and none of them click with you. It doesn't mean you don't like art, but you might give up and think like, "Well, maybe I don't like art." So, it's a challenging, like, broad net landscape to navigate.
Well, at least here in Provincetown, the galleries are very dense. So if you don't like
Yeah.
one, you can just go one house down and go to the other, and then two houses down and go to the other. It's one of the good things about Provincetown. We have a lot of galleries to choose from.
Yeah, that's true. And if I do think that I would say this isn't a criticism of Provincetown, but, um, in Provincetown artists who I live here full time because I love Provincetown and because I love the arts community here very, very deeply. But one of the things I think that P-Town could do better, is that I think when people think about and collectors think about and visitors think about Provincetown as an arts colony, obviously I have this incredible and, people have learned about it from your amazing podcast. Like we have an incredibly rich history of art that, an artist as the longest continuous arts colony in the country that has, like, deeply impacted art and art movement and where contemporary art headed and with this where it is now. And there's, like, a very deep roster, but I think we could celebrate that history and heritage while also giving space to and support to the amazing work that's happening out of here today. And sometimes I feel like that there's this incorrect notion that P-Town was a place, and I think people that spend a lot of time here understand this isn't the case, but that P-Town is a place where amazing art, like, happened, starting with maybe Hawthorne and, up through Motherwell and Frankenthaler and others through Fine Arts Work Center and, then through, like, Jack Pearson and, Joe Meyerowitz and all the amazing photographers that came later during the period of AIDS, et cetera, then there's still so much great art happening today. And so I think, one of the things that I like to try to do or that I see is something that I want to do through my work with POC and but even my company is like help people understand that P-Town is a destination where there is still amazing work that is driving the direction of contemporary art forward, is happening now, like, literally right now around us in many different studios and all year round.
I think it's because it's now, it's difficult to get a perspective on, where it fits in the world of art because we are a bit stuck in the past. I have multiple times heard in my gallery, "Oh, I remember when there were real artists around here." And I just bat my eyelids and think, "What do you think I'm doing?" Um, but yeah,
It's an
people
awful thing to
are
say.
often stuck in the past, but they don't necessarily see what's happening in the present because they have nobody telling them this is important.
Yeah.
Maybe in 10 or 20 years, somebody will say that was important, but they're not seeing it in the now because, it's a bit hard to evaluate what you're seeing in the now.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, things like your podcasts are good because I think you're doing an amazing job of celebrating the history and heritage of the P-Town, arts, colony history while also having people on the show that talk about how to build on that. And I think, there are other, The Independent, I think, is writing great stories about contemporary art. And I just think right now there feels like there's this groundswell of support that I feel inspired by happening with the Provincetown Art Society and happening with Pam and happening with 20 Summers and happening with the Fine Arts Work Center, um, where they're telling more contemporary stories and having more contemporary artists come to town and do important talks that are building on and connecting with artists that are here now. And I think all of that, just we need to do more of that. And I think that's gonna be one way to help that happen is because it's kind of fun. You're right, it is hard to say, like, in the now, what role is this playing? But then the fun part of it can be those conversations. And so, like, let's talk about where it can be.
And I
Um
think also right now, since we are in a time of turmoil,
Mhm,
we do have a lot more voices coming forwards and speaking loudly. And I think especially in the world of queer art, because the
mhm.
queer community is under attack right now in this country. So we have a lot more voices speaking loudly, where in the past it might have been just one of the voices amongst many. This right now we're in a state of emergency, in a state of crisis, and that
Yeah.
brings more art forward, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. But it's also why some place like P Town for queer artists is super important and why we need to protect it as an arts community and why organizations like 20 Summers and Bach and others matter in terms of giving space to contemporary artists and queer artists across the world really to come here and develop work. But even the existing artists here, whether you're queer or not, it's like this is a community where I think you can really express yourself and not be celebrated for it. Yeah, so the more opportunities we have to do that, and i- it's getting harder to do because of how expensive this town can be, um, the better.
Well, I'd like to talk about the fact that you are extremely well traveled with art as well. You go to
Mm,
all the big fairs, all the biennales, and all that stuff. You've been to Venice a few times, I imagine, for the
mm.
Venice Biennale. You've been to Art Basel. What can we here in Provincetown learn from all these big fairs? What can you bring back from that experience?
Well, I mean, I think one thing to learn is that people are traveling all around the world to go to these events, and it's because they've built a reputation as places where you are going to see the quote unquote like important work that matters of the day. Um, and I think in a museum, in a setting like the Biennale, it's curated and it's not necessarily, although there's many gallery shows happening then, but it's not for sale. So it's really about like what is the international, like what is from an international perspective, what does contemporary art look like today from all of these different countries, and so you know, it's like art with a capital A, right? And but it's a destination. And when it comes to art fairs, you know, for better for worse, they're places where art gets sold and galleries are, talk about putting and it really depends on the fair, but they're saying they're putting their most important work by their most important artists. Um, and so as much as people poo poo them, I think it is a really great way to see a lot of art quickly. And it is collector friendly in the sense that, it might not be the most ideal place to see art and it's very commercialized. It does allow people to see a lot of art in a short window of time. And so in some sense it's more an easier, more affordable way to do it than like traveling all around the world to these different galleries. And it allows reputation and relationship building in an easier way. So I think the things that can be learned, and I'd love to even continue this conversation with you offline too, as I think more about it. This will be now a question I'm going to be thinking about like the next month. Um, is how do we make P Town a destination for art that, in the same way that these sort of fairs talk about it's like significant art that matters. And in a, how do we make P Town as a reliable destination for that? Something about these fairs is they take place over a weekend. It's like an event. So and the Biennale stays up all year, but is there something like that we could do here maybe and invite important writers and collectors and in and help tell that deeper story of what they can see here. I mean, part of it is that a collective voice is bigger than one, and I think there's a lot of different galleries here. There's a lot of different artists here. There's a lot of different organizations here. Um, but everyone's so busy and, like everyone is hustling and it's hard to tell like a bigger, more collective story of today. So maybe there's something we can learn about that in terms of, are there scalable ways that we can tell, like, a bigger, more contemporary story of P-Town and why you have to come here to see art of the day here now? That's what's coming to the top of my
Yeah,
head right now, but
it's makes a lot of sense to me. We do have now the Provincetown Art Gallery Association that was formed when the pandemic hit. All the art galleries decided, well, it might be good to coordinate and talk to each other and see what's going on. And that's, I mean, it's only been a few years, so we're still in the beginning stages of this organization. But I think in time, that could be something that could be harnessed to create larger events.
even if not larger events, like, could that, organization hire, I mean, maybe you've already done this, but have a PR
We
person.
do.
Yeah.
The
That could
Provincetown Art Gallery Association, we did hire a PR person that takes care of a lot of social media, and a lot of outreach to the press. So yeah, there's some work being done. We would need more coordination from a whole bunch of organizations. A few years ago, there was an attempt to organize Provincetown art festivals,
mm,
and it
I like that
happened.
idea.
It happened a couple years, but it sort of fizzled. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. And I think it was because of what you said. You know, we're all extremely busy. In
Yeah.
the summer, we're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of people a day, and it's hard to necessarily concentrate on anything between May and October. So we'll see. Maybe we need some people coming from the outside to help us organize these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some germination of ideas starting now. I mean, just in this conversation, I think, the other thing is I'm glad you're a PR person, and the thing is there's so many stories to be told, so it's about also working with that person to say, like, what are those stories? What's the most how do we sort through all the different stories happening across all these different, um, galleries to tell something that's cohesive and, like, breakthrough? And then what's the right place to do that? Like, what's the right publisher to do that with? And so that can be tricky,
Hmm.
especially in a period of time when there's less editors out there. That's something that I think the organization will get better at over time as you see, like, what sticks and what lands. But yeah, the idea of an art week or an art fair, I think, could be really exciting to do here.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Well, good. We have a project now. We can start working on that.
fabulous.
And on that note, well, our time is over, and I'm very happy you were able to join me.
It
Um,
was an absolute pleasure.
and I hope our listeners were able to learn a lot about, how to present themselves to collectors or how to present themselves to publications and how to present themselves on Instagram. I have to say, Instagram's a big tool for me. I use it a lot, and people do come to my gallery because of it. So you're right. It really
Yeah.
changes
People
careers.
buy work digitally. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just, like, say one last thing, which is one I just did another recent podcast, and there were a bunch of collectors on it, and every single one of them said they're comfortable buying art from a digital image online. And so, that's another tool.
I've done it.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Well, good. Thank you very much for joining us. And until next time.